Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Musings of Modern Mystics.
Yes.
I'm straightening my glasses again. I can't help it. My name is Lorelei Hewitt.
And I'm John Davis.
And today, John and I wanted to talk to you about how interesting we find the experience that we see in ourselves and in other people about the traumatic events that happen in our lives that can lead us towards profound spiritual experiences if we use that shock correctly. We were talking beforehand, John, about shock. Well, first let's define it. What is shock when we talk about it? What are some shocking things?
Well, I think that if a lot of it, as we've said before, has to do with how we feel about our relationships with other people and how they define us. We feel loved, we feel cared for, we feel like we're part of a community. And these people are important to us. But what happens when all of a sudden, let's say, you're doing your life and all of a sudden your partner says, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And they walk out on you. Or one of your kids gets angry and moves out, and you had no idea that it was coming. You were paying their bills, you were doing everything. I was like, whoa, who am I if I'm not that person's mother or father? Who am I if I'm not that person's spouse? Or somebody in your community starts to say bad things about you, and you know they're not true, and you try to counteract them, but you feel like you've been abandoned. And those are like the interpersonal shocks. Then there is things where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you get a disease or something that you didn't even know you had, and now you're into $20,000-$30,000 worth of stuff to try to fix it, and it's a shock to the system. Like, everything was going great, I think, I felt, up to this point, and then boom. And so the question today is, how do we train ourselves to be able to use those shocks which will come? There is no way to prevent shocks from happening.
Yeah. That's
okay.
Yep.
They just come to you. In the course of your life, they will come to you. But you can find a way to train yourself so that the shocks that do come to you provide you with an opportunity for a deep opening into your true self that you can learn to use and find yourself underneath the rubble of what's on the surface and use it effectively. But it's not a guarantee. Every shock messes with us in some way, and then we might have to find a new. The other one is your company goes out of business, or they fire you. You didn't even know this was happening. Again, a shock to the system related to how you view yourself in community in relation to other people. You thought you were doing a good job. You thought the company was making money and doing well, and all of a sudden they're going out of business, or they're being bought by some larger company, and now your company that has like 28 employees now has 4 million. And so you're lost in the middle of that, and you're like, what do I do now? I don't know.
Shock is like that, isn't it? I think of shock as when you have a definition of yourself.
Yeah.
Based, as a mother, as a sister, as a daughter, as an employee, and you view yourself, your esteem, your self-worth is based on the experiences that you have in the world that other people give you. They validate you in some way, shape, or form. Then somebody says something to you that pulls that validation out from underneath your feet, and you're flat on your tuchus, and you're going, whoa, I guess I'm not the wonderful mother I thought I was, or I guess if my husband doesn't love me, I must not be lovable. We'll come up with all these realizations, because that's the first thing that happens with trauma, with shock, is that, wow, I am not who you thought I was, and I thought I was who I was because you thought I was that, so therefore I thought I was that. Since you don't think that I'm that, now then what am I if not that? And that is actually the kind of thing that can turn around inside us for quite a long time.
What was that before you were that?
Yes. Yep.
Who were you before that?
Right.
And so you used the Zen idea, which was, encapsulated in the mantra of what was your original face?
Yeah.
And who was I before I was your mother? Who was I before I was your spouse? Who was I before I knew any of these people? Who was I when I was somebody's child? Who was I before that? And get into what is the essence of who I am, not what it is that I've become because it made me feel safe. It made me feel like I belonged. It made me feel comfortable. But when you hit a shock, who am I? Who was I before this? It wasn't that I was nothing. I was something, but maybe a small something. And perhaps we could find a way to go back to that and start again. I always have used I don't know if it's Alice B. Toklas or Gertrude Stein, I think, who had the line that a true artist has to never be afraid to begin again. And in one sense, it's a very Zen statement. It's like, what does that mean? A true artist has to never be afraid to begin again. So, yeah, we could look at, if you're a musician or a painter, that you rip up whatever it is you're working on and start over, or slap some white paint on a canvas. But how about as a psychological thing? What is that which is existent, that when we clean out all of the stuff,
yeah.
Who were you before you had kids?
Yeah.
Who were you before you were married to that person? Who were you before that? And you get back to some essential self. Now, we all do that because of meditation practices, or practices where we're constantly looking at the world with our eyes, with our ears, smelling the roses, and going back to who was this person alone without all of these things that became attached to it. And we use the shock to take ourselves back to this, as opposed to having the shock just obliterate everything and to feel like you're lost in space. So
yeah, well, what is occurring to me as you're talking, and I'm seeing Sue Sims talks about being present, and she's right about that there is this art to being fully present in the moment, and so that even when you get those shocks, if you allow that shock wave to flow through you completely, it's just a wave of energy. But many people, we're not fully present. So what does that mean? That means that really energetically, psychologically, mystically, there's a part of our soul that's sort of way out here, off screen, it's way out there. And when we may have habituated towards ejecting a little piece of ourselves when those shocks occur. Sometimes it's a safety feature because sometimes we just short circuit. You're a little kid, your parents yelling at you is like, I didn't know, I didn't mean to spill the milk, and you've ejected part of yourself, so you're just kind of zoned out and only part of you is present. Now the part of you that's present, that actually is able to process the whole shock. But the part of you that ejected, the part of you that went out here and is thinking, Mary had a little lamb, or whatever, that you've ejected, that didn't get to process the shock. That was protected. You protected a piece of yourself. And in shamanic terms, we would call this soul loss, and you need a healer to do soul retrieval for that. And if you've had a lot of those shocks in another lifetime, in this lifetime as a child, or in a war zone where repeatedly there's this trauma that's happening and you keep ejecting a piece of yourself, what happens then is when you do fully embody yourself back, when you bring that piece back and there's something that reminds you of that trauma that happened, now that piece of you never processed that trauma. It is still there. It's like it's wounded. It's still resonating the shock. So you have this post-traumatic stress syndrome that is talked about in media so often that occurs from that piece of you that never got to process the shock. So if you have a healer, or if you have a practice, because even a meditation practice, John, I have to say, it doesn't necessarily work to get over those kind of shocks. What you need is a healer to hold you and to allow you to be fully present, to bring yourself back, and then to help you process that shock so that you're in your body, you're fully embodied, and you're able to feel that shock completely so that you can release it, you can let it go. And once that happens, and just I have to pause, and I can't say enough, John has really taught me how to help people do this, and this is the master of all shock and awe techniques.
Thank you.
Is John. Well, it's true. It's the to have somebody holding you and be fully present, fully aware, and be able to help you process that shock with somebody there, and then get to the place of awe where you're able to remember, right? And the remembering is actually a very literal term here. You're actually remembering, your members of yourself are coming back together, and you're able to feel the expansion of who you are. And then that leads us into the awe. And why don't you talk a little bit, though, before we go to the awe of the shock and the spiritual illuminations that can come from processing the shock, or from that shock. Because remember, in Hinduism, there's this term, these gods and goddesses that represent energetic experiences. And one is Shakti, which is a female goddess who embodies the shocking things in life, the power, the energy of life. And Shiva, the god of awareness, of that expansive awe-ness. You can't have one with the other. It's like the flame comes with the heat, with the burning. It's one and the same thing. But if you're only experiencing one of those things, you're missing out on the complexity and the depth of learning and expansion and power that all of these life experiences have to offer. But John, one of the things you do with people, and we've talked about breath a lot. Our mutual friend Rick Levine, who is a famous astrologer, if I can so name drop here, Rick Levine. When he first told me about you, he called you John the Breather because you have people take these deep breaths. And can you tell us a little bit about that and about how,
Sure.
Because that's a different technique than the shamanic technique of soul retrieval that many people use.
Let me tell you where that comes from as a technique with regard to shock. When your system is shocked, you literally collapse.
Yeah.
And everything narrows. And so the contraction is deep and profound. And so what happens in that, and if you just think about it from a standpoint of working your body, you're not breathing. You're in a contraction. You might have started with,
yeah.
But when you hit that shock, you're like,
yeah.
You're in a shallow breathing, you're
yeah.
basically surviving, and you are in the survival state, and you don't want to breathe, because if you breathe, you're going to be overwhelmed by the shock. And so we have to learn in the middle of the shock sequence how to re-enter our body. And one of the ways to re-enter the body is to learn how to breathe through the shock. So in that sense, breathing provides the board from which you can surf the shock wave. And so it's like breathing. If you learn how to breathe, while you feel the shock, while you feel the abandonment, while you feel the loss, you begin to breathe and say, I will keep my balance, but not to be comfortable, but to open up the space so that I can see beyond, oh, I want you back. Oh, I wish this didn't happen. Oh, I wish I had said something else. I wish you'd said something else. Anything that shocks the comfort system, the grounding system, is going to pull you out of your body because you have contracted so much that there's very little psychic space there for you to inhabit and be present.
Yeah, you know what's before you go on, what I'm being reminded of is this story that you tell us about the zebra running from the predator, and the way, you know, what happens is you do have to contract when there is a trauma, when there is something scary, terrifying happening in your life. You do need to bring your energy in and be very focused for a brief period of time and just run, take off. The adrenaline surges and you're just, and you're not thinking analytically about diddly squat at that moment. You're just going.
There is another brain
that
is. Doesn't have words.
Yes,
and that brain is an instinctive, intuitive sense of your survival.
Yes.
It has integrity at the level of survival. Not too much anywhere else, but at the level of survival, it knows what to do, and you have to trust it. So I use Peter Levine's little movie where he shows the zebra running from the cheetah, and cheetah's chasing him all over Africa, and finally he stops the movie, and everybody goes, "Oh God, that poor zebra." And then he says, cheetahs are endangered species. They're an anorexic of the cat world. They don't know they're hungry until the last minute. They've got about 8 hours or so to find some food or they'll die. Turns back on the movie. Cheetah, go get the zebra. Come on, cheetah, let's go. And all of a sudden we're rooting for something else. And the zebra gets away. And the zebra climbs up some hill, the mountain, and the cheetah goes to look for something that's easier to catch. But you see the zebra lying there and breathing deep, profound breathing, while you see its heart almost coming out of its chest from having to run for so long. And then the thing quiets down and you see the zebra entering into a state of unified consciousness. Perhaps the zebra has just like, now it's, instead of being alone and being chased, it's now completely connected with zebradom. It's completely connected with the animal world.
Yeah.
And it is fully as conscious as zebras get right there, right now.
Yes.
And they did it through the breathing and allowing everything to move through the system and then to come out. And all of a sudden, in the deep quiet, the zebra pops up and goes to rejoin the herd.
Yep.
And it learns how to resolve. We do not spend the time. We do not allow the breathing to happen. We take the shock and we start running. We get out of our body. We collapse. We contract. And
we often stay that way.
And sometimes it just stays that way because we keep thinking, this might happen again.
Yeah.
Who hasn't been in a situation? Think about it. If you were in a terrible situation with the opposite sex or the same sex and things were really awful in this great relationship that you thought you had and all of a sudden it fell apart, don't you think for the next couple of months or so you're a little wary about it's still in there? You're like, I don't know. What if there was a financial decision you made and all of a sudden you lost $100,000? Then some next time somebody comes and says, "Oh, I've got a great deal for you," don't you think you go, I don't know?
Yeah.
And that's the reverberation of that shock that was unresolved. You're still thinking, these people are out to rip me off, or this person will take me for a ride, or and so it's still in there. And so, but that was just one situation. That was just one person. That was just one deal. That was just one situation that all of a sudden affected the next 6 months worth of connections that you could have made. What if you were able to use that to go from shock to awe about the rest of the world? And in so doing, you heal things that happened to you when you were 2. You heal things that happened to you when you were 5. You heal things that happened to you when you were 14. You heal things that happened to you when you were 22.
Yeah.
All in that same moment because you were able to expand at the moment of the shock, open to the opportunity to identify and find your spiritual self and realize that you are all one thing. that from the body to the spirit to the psychic wholeness of your identity, you are present, you are alive, and you're here, and you're able to go on.
Yeah,
In
and
peace.
that awe is it can manifest in people as a true spiritual awakening, and people will go on and learn meditation. They will have this expanded sense of who they are in relation to the world and to others. And then when somebody does not agree with your perceptions of yourself. So in other words, if somebody again comes up to you and says, oh, you biatch, or how could you do that? Whatever. It's not going to throw you off balance, because you've reached this place of awe and you realize and you remembered yourself to such a degree that you go, oh yeah, I know this, and who you think I am does not define my sense of who I am in relation to you. It doesn't define my sense of who I am in relation to God. It does not really. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself in my thoughts here. But you're able to define yourself moment to moment because you're fully present in a way that is much more empowering, and it allows you to interact with the world from a place of strength. It's weird, isn't it, John? Because you're actually a little more vulnerable in a way.
Right.
But there's
a lot more
vulnerable.
But it also opens up possibilities that didn't exist before. The vulnerability, the humility opens up things that other people couldn't see after a situation like that. There is the possibility of something opening up for you that's quite profound. And on a very practical level, if you can stay in that state, I always remember the Milton Erickson story where he's at a mental hospital giving a small speech on medical hypnosis. And he says, well, hey, does anybody have anybody who's like really, really difficult? And a guy in the back raised his hand and said, yeah, we got a guy who's screaming and yelling all the time, and we got to keep him, keep him down and keep him on meds because he just goes off the wall. And he says, let me go see. So they take him down to find the guy, and they said, so give me, what do you got? He thinks he's Jesus Christ. And he's like screaming that everybody should believe in him and that people are, annoying here and they don't understand the spiritual dimension of his work here and all of that. And Milton says, okay. And as a person who isn't connected to the shock of trying to run an insane asylum or a medical board, he goes, he expands instead of contracts. And he comes up with something. And he says, do you have a wood shop here? And they said, yes, down on the ground floor. It's in the back. It's 3A. He goes, okay, good. He hears this guy screaming in the hallway. He goes down to meet. He says, Jesus Christ, fantastic. I've been wanting to meet you forever. And the guy goes, finally, somebody here who recognizes who I am. And he said, Jesus, they just fired all the carpenters, and you're a really good carpenter. Can I take you down to the wood shop? We've got a bunch of things that need to be done. Oh, fantastic, said the other guy. And he takes him down to the wood shop, and he's in the wood shop, and he's happy as a clam.
Yeah.
And it was like, you meet somebody where they are instead of trying to fight with it, and that you do the same thing with yourself.
Yeah, because you're just not you don't have a defined sense of yourself that is predicated upon another person's sense of themselves, or a sense of yourself that is predicated upon their sense of you, which is even more common. In other words, we think about who we are based on what other people think we are. If somebody thinks that I'm nice, then I'm a nice person. If somebody thinks that I'm beautiful, then I'm a beautiful person. Instead of my being able to look in the mirror or feel the kindness in my heart and the love towards other people, because I can't control the way other people receive me. I really can't. I've tried. I really have. I've really tried. It doesn't work. But being fully present does allow me to let go of that. And it's more than just an intellectual thing that we have to get to be able to embody that awareness. We really do need to help our bodies by doing breath work, by doing exercises. There are mental exercises that we can do, but when you really feel like you are butting your head up against yourself inwardly, emotionally, I just can't recommend a healer enough. Healers are really, that's what our forte is. It's not talk, it's movement of energy, it's movement of awareness, it's holding the space for you to be expanded in a way where you're not alone, because it can be a little scary to see just how big and magnificent you are. It's very different than the contracted state you may have convinced yourself that you are. It's very different.
I would like to leave you with an exercise, and that is that I want you to be quiet for about 10 minutes. And then I want you to think about an event that was shocking to you in the past. And then as you think about that, just see the whole picture in your mind of what that would look like on a movie screen. Then I want you to feel what you felt, the pain, the loss, the devastation, whatever it was. And I want you to feel in your heart, in your solar plexus, in your pelvis, in your legs, just all of that. And then I want you to begin to breathe. You are going to train the system to begin to breathe when the next shock hits you.
Yeah.
Because that's, the breathing will take you from shock to awe.
Yeah.
And the next time the shock, you'll feel the shock and you'll go, oh, I recognize that's the shock that I've been breathe. All of a sudden the breathing begins by itself, because you know that in order to gain the most from the shock, and to move into awe, you need to expand rather than contract.
Right.
And to be in the body, that requires breathing.
Yeah. Breathing. I would add to that too, that when I do that, I mentally tell myself, release, relax, expand. I will tell myself to do that, yet the breath does, it really literally keeps me in my body, because breath is the thing that keeps us alive. We can only survive without breathing for like a minute and a half. We can survive without food and water for, a few days, but breath, no, that's the thing that keeps us in our bodies. So breathe deep.
Yes.
Breathe.
Thank you for watching.